I've been trying to hold myself back. I don't want to rant at you because I'm quite passionate about this future of work business. And when I connected with Z, I thought this is a great opportunity to get some feedback from you. So I'm very interested in the questions because I'm preparing a TED talk on this, so it all came together very nicely. I love Jim's logo. It's like the world president, isn't it? Cyanide Corporation. So as Glenn said, I run a flexible workspace. It's quite small scale. It's nothing like this. We have only 70 members, but we're in the suburbs in Surbiton, which is in Kingston. It's not very far away from Bath, but, down there in South London. And the other thing I do is, sort of on a voluntary basis, we in Southwest London are trying to create a more fluid talent pool in the tech sector, and we're calling that the Southwest London Tech Cluster. We're copying a wonderful man called Nigel Diaz, who's doing exactly the same thing in the borough of Croydon, and for the very same reasons, and this is all connected with the future of work. The reason that Nigel set up Croydon Tech City was that he wanted to enable people to work near home, and he wanted to enable businesses, large and small, to be able to dip into the talent pool of freelancers so that they could work. And so that would benefit everybody because you want to have that ecosystem flourishing. And then you can have very well qualified recruiters who are working in that talent pool, putting people together as well. And it's fantastic. And people can live, they can work near home and their work-life balance improves. So you would think, on the one hand, there's cause for optimism if people realise that, and people like Nigel going ahead and doing it. On the other hand, this is where the rant is coming from. I feel that we are miles away from being able to achieve the vision of the kind of work life that will work for us. I think there are practical reasons why we're miles away, and I think there are very serious political reasons why we're miles away. And it's so disappointing that, for how many years have we been going on about gender relations in politics? How we need to empower women to be able to get into a senior role. And the evidence that we're winning that battle, I just don't see it. In some industries you're even going backwards. Partly that's to do with political buy-in, and partly it's to do with and so other maybe more tidal changes that are affecting working life. So I think we need to get to grips with the challenges ahead of us. But I think there is, on the other hand, some cause for optimism, because if we have, as one of Jim Clark's collaborators, Professor Joseph Stiglitz, said, we've got the option of making transformational policy decisions to do things, if we can find a sort of critical mass of political will to do that. We have done it in London in the case of the Olympic Games. We said that we were going to put on a wonderful Olympic Games, and we did it. We found the money to do it somehow. That was a transformation that took a very long time, because if you go back to 1996, we as a nation were only able to achieve 1 gold medal. In the Olympics just gone, we did fantastically well. We were number 2 in the table in the world. In 2012, we had 29 gold medals. And it was John Major's government that introduced the national lottery. They said, no, we're going to focus resources on improving the lot of sportsmen and women who want to make that their life's work to be the best in the world. And that worked. Back in the 1930s, I think it was Herbert Morrison, decided that British population were far too unhealthy and we needed more open-air swimming pools. And he made it happen. And they built open-air swimming pools all over London. Some of them are still here. There's one in just down the road in Tooting, for example, Tooting Back Leader. Wonderful idea. And it just requires it to be a political will. But when you look at the recent, for me, I'm going to be political here, the recent disaster, I think, of the referendum campaign, everything to do with the referendum, the very fact that there was a referendum on this issue, I think it shows that if you don't have visionaries who can paint a vision of a better world that the population can buy into, you end up in a confusion and ultimately a chaos of sort of disorganization, which is why so many of us are feeling, I don't know, disorientated. That lack of vision has led to a kind of a one-way street, really, where there isn't the vision there, so we can't buy into that in our working lives and say, I'm going to work towards this. What are we working toward? We should be working towards a worse future, and that's not something that's energizing in any way, shape, or form. So we have a problem, but we kind of know that we have to do something about it, and to some extent we know that we can do it, and the Olympic Games is an example. So what's that got to do with the future of work? Well, I think concerning work, we have to get organized. We are aware that whether we're working in a large organization, which needs to refresh its skill base, have access to the the orange area that PwC were talking about, or whether we're a very small organization or a one-man or one-woman band who's working as a freelancer, we need to be in an ecosystem that's a virtuous ecosystem that works for everybody. There are some great examples, in the world. If you look at tech, you could look at the lack of cynicism that there is in Silicon Valley. People will tell me about that. What's the difference between Tech City, UK, and Silicon Valley? A lot of it is about cynicism. It's about the ability to think through our obstacles, but not be too fazed by them, and to overcome them. And so we need to have that kind of ecosystem, which is positive. It needs to work for us for certain practical reasons. If we're building a business, then we need to have access to the talent that we require, whether it's virtual or it's physical. People do like to actually work physically. People don't really like working remotely. My clients in Mapleworks are there not necessarily because it's the best practical solution for them to work in a workspace as opposed to working from home. They're there because they want to be with other people. We're social animals, and being with other people energizes us, and we enjoy our working day when we're in contact with other people. Working entirely remotely is challenging, and for some people it's very depressing. They don't really want to have to do it. So I'll just finish up by saying, I guess, that just this very meetup that you've created, Z, with your colleagues, is a very good way of trying to overcome all of these challenges that we've been discussing. And it should work not just for the small businesses and the micro business, but it should work for big businesses as well, especially if the meetup is one of a series of events that brings people together within an ecosystem. So I'm big on ecosystem. Thank you very much.
David, can't help noticing you brought up the elephant in the room, Brexit.
Yeah.
What sort of challenges have the clients that use your space? How has that impacted the way they work, their attitude? I mean, do people talk to you about that? Well,
there have been short-term impacts, and there will no doubt be long-term impacts. The short-term impact for some of the co-workers within Mapleworks have been sort of the order, well, I was planning to move to France with my family, and actually we have a young family who did move to France. We had to say goodbye to them in the middle of last year. And they've moved back. Why? Because they've got South African passports, and they'd spend more time in the UK, and the only way they could qualify for a European passport of any description, the best way of qualifying for it was to move back to the UK. So they had expected to have the freedom of movement within the EU, and they found that now, because of the referendum, that freedom of movement was restricted, and their choices were restricted. So it's cost them a lot of money. They had to give up living in France, and they had to move back to the UK. Another example was a company who is a small business that works in video content, and they were working as a contractor for an American business. And that American business, not necessarily for a reason that was very concrete, they just didn't like the way things were going in the UK, and they decided not to award him the work. They thought, no, they'd go to another company that was based in Germany. So I mean, some of these stories are real in the sense that you can trace them back to the referendum. Others are more kind of apocryphal, and a lot of it is about mood.
Is there a sense of dust settling? People are now starting to think, okay, because as small businesses, we have to be agile and adapt to our circumstances. Is there a sense of organisations are starting to do
Well,
that?
people have said this before. I mean, particularly if you're in the Remain camp, people have said it's like mourning. So you go through a well-known curve, as it were, and I suppose people are to some extent coming to terms with a future which is very different from the future that they expected for themselves. But people are resilient, so they're attempting to do that.
Sorry, just wanted to bring up a point. I had someone speaking recently about this very Brexit thing, and they're a specialist tech company who probably are not a start-up now because they are a few years down their journey. But they wanted to employ, and this is back to recruitment, specialist recruitment, and they wanted to employ a Japanese, someone who spoke and could write Japanese and would be able to do data science in this particular field. So I say could do data science because I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it was a very specialist role. It was a role that you knew where to go and get your talent pool from. So they knew that they needed to go to a specialist recruiter to obtain someone probably who lived outside of the UK. In fact, they did. Identified a candidate in Japan who they wanted to bring to the UK, and they were a small organisation, so they were not a multinational Deutsche Bank or someone else that had a reciprocal arrangement for work visas that they could go into the government and say, one of these reciprocal arrangements. They actually went to the Home Office or wherever they go and get to apply for this particular work permit for this guy to come in, like lady, gentleman, I don't know, and person to come in, and they were told that they could not have the work permit. They said you can in 9 weeks' time, but under EU legislation you have to advertise that in the job centre. And they turned around and said, but I am not going to get a Japanese-speaking data scientist who I want to have these particular requirements in a job centre. You know that, I know that, the EU knows that, and everyone knows that that's not going to happen. No disrespect to the job centre and the candidates that might apply, it just will not happen. So he said, yeah, no, you've got to do that. And then you have to reapply and you have to pay another £1,000 and do all the paperwork again. And by the way, after that, you have to wait another 3 weeks for the application to go through. So he said, I need this person, like, next week he's on a plane from Tokyo, but I can't do it. So he said, okay, then I'll go through the system. So he came to the 10 minutes later, speed up the story, and said, right, I've advertised in the job centre, here's the advertisement, I couldn't find this candidate. Now I have to go and reapply, another 3 weeks, another £1,000, his time as well. Anyway, lo and behold of it, 3 months later he gets this sign-off to employ the same guy. Well, he goes to get the same guy, the guy's gone to another job, so then he has to find someone else.
So that's the regulation.
Yeah, and then he said that actually, apart from that, and the fact that he can tie up contracts outside of the EU with other countries quicker because he doesn't have to go through other red tape. He said his particular business was actually benefiting. I'm sorry it was long, but you have to tell the story, and recruiters will understand, and Brexiteers and whatever will understand, whoever you are will understand.
Well, anything alleviating with Japan, ask me.
Yeah. Any more questions for David? No? Okay, I think we'll move on to the video clip, and then afterwards we'll do a bit of a panel and we'll get some more questions from guests as well.